Hi everyone, welcome back to another Fridays with a Ranger. I'm Ranger Bailey and I'm filming from my basement here, and today we're going to be talking about whales. Not just any kind of whales, the whale that Lewis and Clark went in search for during their stay at Fort Clatsop. Now the winter for Lewis and Clark from 1805 to 1806 wasn't the easiest. They had a lot of hardships and finding stuff to keep them occupied were diminishing. So the winter at Fort Clatsop, which is in present-day Oregon, was very rainy for the Corps of Discovery, considering how out of their 3-month stay there, it only stopped raining 12 days. Now imagine all the fur pelts and other non-water resistant materials they had with them in the rain. It was very hard to keep them dry, and so when it would rain, their materials would rot, leaving them with less supplies than what they came with and to utilize. So they took the little supplies they had left in order to trade with the local tribes nearby, the Klotzups being one of them. They would visit often just because they were camped on the same side of the Columbia River as the Klotzups, which became very convenient in time. This is also why they named their fort Fort Clatsop, because the Klotzups were so helpful during their stay in the winter. Since the Klotzup tribe often visited the Corps and traded a lot to gain more supplies, the majority of what Lewis and Clark had were smaller fish hooks and even smaller goods. So because of this, the Corps of Discovery often depended on local tribes to get what they needed. And because of this, the Corps gained a lot of trust with the Klotzups, who gave them very helpful advice and even directed them to more possible trading negotiations. So it was in early January of 1806 when the Corps had been notified by the Klotzups that there had been a beached whale off the shore of Tillamook Head. This is in present-day Cannon Beach in Oregon. After Clark had heard the news, he and a party of 12 set out in 2 canoes for the whale, Sacagawea or Sacagawea being one of them. This just gives you a bit of a sneak peek into Sacagawea's curiosity and trust for the men on the expedition, just because she had insisted to Clark that she deserved to go. I mean, she had traveled just as much as the men, and she had not yet seen the ocean before, so it is assumed that she definitely deserved to go. So when the party of 12 had reached the Tillamook community, Clark describes it as they had crossed a creek 80 yards near 5 cabins and proceeded to the place where the whale had perished, only found the skeleton of this monster on the sand between 2 of the villages of the Tillamook Nation. So to their surprise, the whale had already been picked over, leaving only the bones to fend for. The whale, in which Clark had recorded to be about 105 feet, had already been stripped clean by the Tillamook tribe, since it had died about a week prior to their arrival. This made it harder for the party to gain more supplies to trade for. Clark had also mentioned that when they arrived at the scene, the natives were already boiling down the blubber in a process to make more oil. They would separate the blubber or the whale's fat from its skin, which would also insulate it, keeping it warmer in colder temperatures, and then they would boil it down and render it until it became a liquid, or in our case, oil. So after the whale oil and meat were extracted, they would often keep the oil in the whale's bladder and other organs to better preserve it. The preservation of whale oil or terrain oil was very important to coastal tribes just because it played such a vital role in their diet. They used it for about every meal, and not only was the oil important, so was its meat. It lasted much longer than other meats such as elk, which is what the Corps often would eat. These are just some of the reasons why the Tillamook tribe were so opposed to giving the party such large amounts of the whale supply. So instead, what they gave Clark and his party were about 300 pounds of blubber and about a few gallons of oil. Now that doesn't seem like a lot considering how what the skeleton of the whale was described as. It is assumed that it was a blue whale, which is of the largest of the whale species, considering how adult blue whales weigh about 110,000 pounds to 330,000 pounds. Now compared to what Clark was given, that's a ton. So they didn't get much, but he was still happy with what they acquired, because whale oil is very important to the Corps of Discovery, considering how they used it for preserving food, making candle wax, but to mainly be used for their oil lamps, which is what they often utilized. So after the party had been issued what they needed, they returned safely back to Fort Clatsop, and William Clark was noted to be responsible for the naming of the shore that they had found the whale on, which is known as Ecola Creek today. Ecola is the Chinook jargon term for whale, and although Clark had only one encounter with a whale there, the name still stuck, and it's known as Ecola Creek today, located at Cannon Beach in Oregon. This area of the coast was very important to the local tribe since they did a lot of trading with European visitors and used the land for fishing and goods. The coastal tribes were more business-worthy, making their communities way more successful since they were able to control who came in and out of their shores. But this also made the nations harder to bargain with. But that didn't stop Lewis and Clark from the success in their trade, even though they were seen as amateurs with negotiating. Because of this, trade played a large role during the winter at Fort Clatsop. The Corps didn't have much to do because of all the rain, so keeping in touch with the local tribes and developing good relations with them was a very important aspect to their journey. It made their time worthwhile until it was time to return back east, ending their expedition on September 23rd of 1806. I hope you enjoyed today's video about the art of trading whale blubber, and tune in next time for another Fridays with a Ranger. Bye everyone.